Hello, everyone. My name is Eric Brinkman. I'm the Senior Director of Product Management for the Dev section, and today is the Dev section group conversation. Thanks for joining us. Scott, you have the first agenda item.
Yeah, a comment rather than a question. Just wanted to give you and the team kudos for a great deck, super informative, really well laid out. Also appreciate the focus on product usage metrics. We really need to understand who's using what and take action to drive up usage. And one of the big drivers for that is usability and performance. So great to see that focus throughout the deck. Also like the humble user experience videos. I haven't watched them yet, but glad that we're making those widely available so we can all learn from them. And then finally, like the number one priority for each area, it just really helps to have the number one thing you must get done clear for the team. So thanks for all that.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that comment, Scott. One thing to highlight on the focus on product usage metrics is we've got on slide 18 a screenshot of the newly revamped Dev section performance indicator page. We now have the performance indicators defined for every group. That page is driven off of the performance indicators.yaml file. And so you can find all the information there. One of the really nice things, and we're kind of a little bit behind where I'd personally like us to be, even though I appreciate your comment, Scott, because I'd really like to have all these instrumented. We're working with the team to get all these instrumented by no later than 13.4, and a number of them are coming in 13.3, and a number of them are already instrumented. Because I think where metrics gets really interesting is when you can look at the metrics every month and look at the graphs and start to do drill down analysis and start to glean insights, right? We can stop talking about instrumenting. We start talking about analyzing the data and figuring out, okay, what moved the needle? How are we correlating that thing that we launched, 3-4 months ago, and now self-managed instances are upgrading and actually getting that value and seeing the usage increase. And so that's where I'm excited to take some of the performance indicator review stuff that we're doing on a monthly cadence, and obviously laying out this framework is allowing us to get there. So I just wanted to kind of highlight that on the back of your comment.
Awesome. Thanks, Eric.
Yeah, thank you for the comment. Really appreciate it. Jeremy.
Yeah, thanks a lot. I guess this question is probably most relevant for Tim, who added some great commentary on the agenda. But I was really curious about the throughput improvement on slide 23. I was happy to see that it's better than ever. And I was curious as to what drove the improvement and what we can do more of.
Thanks a lot. And yeah, I think it's mainly that the teams have a much higher focus on throughput, starting from more dashboards, more visibility from managers, more visibility by the team members, and simply iteration on iteration, really starting from the beginning on, working together in the quad planning and with counterparts, really on improving already at the beginning to do smaller stuff and learning experience. It's a lot of different topics in the different teams, and a lot of that stuff is really around experience, that there was a bad development cycle, for example, and there was something that slipped or that didn't work out. And then in the retrospective, a lot of people are working closely together with not only engineering, but with development, with not only development, but with product, with UX, to really break stuff down early. And that really helps. And what I see in some of the other teams, what we're also trying to constantly improve, and I think in the last 6 months, there was a huge improvement already, which is the pipeline times. We see that GitLab, for example, with much smaller pipeline times, and GitLab UI and such projects have a much nicer iteration phase to some extent, as the pipeline times are much shorter. And as we see that pipeline times are reduced also on GitLab on the main project, we see also their better iteration, because it's not just anymore, okay, I'm pushing and I will take a look earliest on the next day, but rather I know that this will most probably come back in the next hour. And that's good to see. And it's also one of the OKRs that we are focusing in the next quarter on really improving them even more, as we found a lot of things that we can improve. And yeah, I think those are some of the major trends, and the rest is really going into the topics, going into the teams, and the EMs have done a great job on having a focus on, and the ICs have, I know a lot of ICs are way more into the topic of let's break that stuff down, and that's really great to see. And yeah, you also had a comment, please.
Yeah, I mentioned that more visibility on these metrics has really helped a lot. I think that on Manage as a stage, we're kind of reviewing these metrics more often. We're talking about them more often in team meetings because of the benefit of having that transparency and that single source of truth. So thank you to everyone who's invested time and effort into those dashboards, because I think it's really paid off in being able to have a common set of metrics that we can all kind of talk about and track. The analytics group on Manage is working to create analytics features specifically in GitLab so that we can start moving some of these features off of Sisense and actually into the product and actually embed these into the handbook. So that is kind of an objective that we have and we're moving towards. But in the meanwhile, it's been hugely helpful to have these in Sisense. So thanks for all the great work.
Yeah, and I can't wait to see all those numbers directly in GitLab. And I'm pretty sure there are some other directors and VPs like Christopher, where we discussed this a lot of times, who is really looking forward to dog fooding all those topics. So yeah, can't wait for the day.
Yeah, sounds good. I'll add some links to the agenda on some of those epics and issues that we're working on. Cool. Scott, I think you might have the next item.
Yeah, I'm sort of typing live here. We very recently defined a KR to improve the response time for the top 5 pages by 25%. Sorry if this is hitting you by surprise. I assume you're in on the formation of this. Can you talk a little bit about next steps with respect to improving performance? I know it's been an ongoing effort, but if you could tell me about either Eric or Tim, where we are in that journey. And I will paste in the top 5 pages here.
Yes, as I'm living and breathing in the topic over the last couple of months, I'm more than happy to answer that. Okay. And we also had already a huge focus, and especially on those areas. And we have done some improvement, especially to the total loading time, for example, of the repository view. We have found some overall topics, and there is an update from last week where I was summarizing a little bit what we were able to improve and what we were also not able to improve so far, and where we currently see the biggest topics. I had a long discussion last week, and I believe this is especially around those 5 pages. 50% of the improvements we can do on those pages are around global improvements. This means like reducing our CSS, reducing our JavaScript, moving a lot of the components over to the GitLab UI component so that we simply can delete a lot of libraries, that we can get, some people still know it, jQuery out of our main JavaScript bundle and stuff like that. So this is like really global work that we are moving forward. And there are, I also mentioned it in my slide, is around icons, which is sounds really weird in the sense of performance, but what does this mean? We are removing and replacing, I think we started with 900 instances of our Font Awesome icons. We are now down to 500, and everyone on the engineering side is more than welcome to pick up some of those. Also product managers, don't be shy, we can help you on that. To really get also the last 500 now out of the product. Why? First of all, it looks much better because then we use our own icons, but on the other hand, we can delete our icon font that is loaded on every page load, for example. And we have exactly the same for CSS, that we remove some of our CSS out of the main bundle. So this is really a lot of global work. The same goes for the backend side. And the other part is really focused on those 5 top pages where we still can do tons of work. There was already a lot of work. So for example, the MR page is something that is very complex because it's currently looking at completely different use cases. You can start, or do you start optimizing performance for the average case, for the huge cases, because an MR page needs to scale in reality to infinite, that you have an MR with 800 files. How do you perform on that? Where is the focus and stuff like that? So I think there were a lot of different improvements, and I think product management and engineering is working closely together to do those improvements. And there it is really specific so that we can reduce the latency, that we do some more intelligent loading, that we think about, can we perhaps combine the issue list and the issue details so that we are not even doing a page jump anymore. And this really starts from super basic stuff, from getting icons out to really super complex work. The biggest problem that we currently see to some extent is that a lot of those tasks, like moving the components over to GitLab UI, the icons, etc., are do everything or nothing happens. So this means only when all 900 icons are migrated, only then you can hit the delete button and delete the font awesome font, for example, as a very simple example. But the same goes for the components. Only when all our modules are converted, only then we can delete the jQuery stuff for the modules and so on. So yeah, it's a lot of work, but we are really constantly pushing at the moment, and we have identified, that's the nice part, we have identified a lot of stuff that we can improve. And so, yeah.
Okay, great update, Tim. Thanks very much.
Okay, I guess we can hang on for maybe 30 more seconds to see if there's any more questions, or if anyone wants to just jump in without writing one, feel free.
I'm kind of curious about the. I'm looking at the UX kind of slides that we have around validating whether or not our merge requests are lovable, and also validating whether or not our issue tracking features are complete. I'm happy to dig around asynchronously for any kind of feedback or insights, but I'm curious to know what we learned, if anything, during that work. I happen to see that it looked like maybe our merge request maturity level might decline from lovable to complete. And I'm curious to know what kind of drove some of those changes.
I think this is Mike. We're in the process of still reviewing the data that we gathered. And we're actually, we have scores for issue tracking and merge requests, but we're also seeking another pair of eyes at those scores. So it's currently in progress, but currently the scores are lower than, like, say, lovable. It's still a work in progress. And we'll update everyone when we have more data to share.
I can't speak for merge requests, but I did review some of the issue tracking interviews with Holly Reynolds, who conducted them all. And we talked about it pretty extensively, and the number was lower than we hoped, but it was also interesting to watch how many folks got tripped up on really small things that wasn't necessarily like a feature missing, but just a confusing usability. So there's a ton of low-hanging fruit that we found. Something as simple as, like, when you're trying to relate an issue to another issue, everyone got tripped up on that just starting to type in the issue number, but you have to include the # first for it to autocomplete, which isn't intuitive to people who aren't GitLab power users. So lots of, like, small things, I think, cut us quite a bit. And then there's also some use cases where we had success criteria defined for some of the jobs to be done. And the testers solve those jobs in non-traditional ways, which I think speaks well to GitLab for its flexibility, but also it wasn't the ideal path, and it resulted in the end user having to take lots of extra steps. So I don't think that there was necessarily within issue tracking a ton of features missing. There are some that are known, but it was mostly usability where folks failed on different scenarios, and it was really helpful to get that feedback. And yeah, good exercise. So.
If I could ask one clarifying question, just in the process of talking to Christy about it, who I don't think is on the call, my overall evaluation is that we're really changing the way we're evaluating these. In particular, my understanding is about 2 years ago, we were largely looking at customer feedback for that decision, as opposed to this is much more systematic, much more detail oriented to focus on what do we think are the key aspects. And in my mind, at least, I feel like what we're doing is we're raising the bar. So like team members shouldn't think of this as a regression. They should think of it in terms of, hey, we're raising the bar and we just want to get better, right? Like that's really what we're doing here. Mike, is that your general sense, or is my understanding incorrect, and it's really more of a regression that we should be looking at here?
Yeah, you're right. It isn't like some kind of regression that we should look at. I think we're being more systematic. We're using more of an evidence-based approach with target end users, and rather than say like anecdote or a feeling. And you know, this isn't. We're not going to do one of these and then, you know, just not do another one. It's a continual process, and I think every time we'll do it, we'll see where changes we've made make improvements. You know, if our intent is to respond to that feedback that we got through this category maturity process.
Yeah. Thanks a lot, Mike, Christopher, and Gabe for the feedback. I know this is a relatively new process, so I was just really curious kind of what we learned kind of along the way, but I'm personally really excited about moving to kind of a maturity framework that's based off of direct customer feedback. I think that's definitely a huge step forward.
It also tells us that our work is not yet done by a long shot in these areas, right? We kind of hang our hats on merge requests and source code management and code review features, and by our own measure, they may not be as lovable as we think they are, which I think actually is kind of like an exciting challenge to rise up to for the team, because we're a market leading solution for that capability, and if by our own grading rubric we're not yet as good as we think we are, I think that's actually really exciting, because it tells us we have a ton of improvements to go and make, and we can make that experience even better for the industry as a whole. We can be a leader there, rather than just say, we're here with GitHub and that's good enough. So I actually think it's exciting. Christopher, you were right. It was a very kind of qualitative, anecdotal type of a grading scale, and now we're moving it to a quantitative, systematic approach, and I'm a big fan of it. The other thing too to remember is that our category maturity is shifting, right? Because one of the inputs that should be into that more objective and qualitative measure is what's going on in the market. So if we just said, hey, MRs are lovable, or source code is lovable, it will not be lovable a year from now if we made no improvements to it, because the market moves, our competitors move, and so we have to always maintain at least some semblance of understanding what's going on around us to make sure that our maturity is being measured appropriately. So that's something else to consider too. It was a great question, Jeremy. Thanks for the call out there. That it can be hard to find these little nuggets in 40 slides of content, but that was a really important one. All right, we'll wait about 10 more seconds and then we'll call it. Which, by the way, waiting 10 seconds on a call with like 50 people is an excruciating amount of time. Scott, did you have a question?
No, I was just gonna congratulate you on a GC. Well done.
All right.
Thanks a lot.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thanks,
bye.
everyone. Bye.
Thanks all.